Oxenfree is your typical soft horror genre cliched storied adventure game that's spooky and doesn't offer any challenge to the player other than the struggle to hear a full line of dialogue when the dialogue system isn't shagging you in the back. Because sometimes when you have a choice to choose dialogue and it's queued into the system, the conversation with the NPC you're talking to will end and queue up the next line of dialogue set based on that choice, instead of letting that previous queued up dialogue continue till its end. But in addition to that problem, the accessibility between choice and those systems have a horrendous time lapse in between those choices for you choose how do you like to proceed. Meaning that if you want to listen to a full conversation, you'd have less than a second to pick an optional line of dialogue, or the game will consider your input as null, and it will be like you chose nothing, which is a major flaw within the game's design, and is awfully terrible considering most of this game is the interactions between you and the characters you surround, and the characters that are around you. Speaking of the characters, you play as a naive-souled teenage girl who's about to march herself and her friends into an island full of death, misery, and pain that could have been avoided if they read an article about the horrible happenings that occurred on this island. But then again, it wouldn't be a horror show if not for these teenagers and their stupidity. But the overall interactive dialogue and the conversations that ensue from conversations is alright, and the story can't exist without the main character Alex because of course it couldn't, because she's special. Meaning that she is the most traumatized out of the bunch in your party, having a dead family member cliche that she watched violently drown, unable to do anything because she was powerless cliche. But derailing away from that topic, the importance of the dialogue choice in-game allows for the players to receive one of 5 endings, which I'll discuss a little bit later. But there are no good or bad choices in this game. They're all to the player's discretion and sense of morality, making the playable character you play as the character proxy that just happens to have a personality, backstory, and a sarcastic sense of dry humor that rivals a plummeting snowball down a mountain. For example, during the game you'll have the option to sacrifice a character named Clicera to save the remaining group members within your party, or you can let her live and possibly let everyone else die. But the incentive to all of this is that Clicera is kind of a dick, but you have the choice to choose whatever you choose, which will impact the story in magical ways. You can either protect her, make up with her, or completely destroy their relationship, which are pretty standardized game mechanics. However, the most profound and interesting mechanic this game has to offer is this ability to become a time-traveling ghost. To elaborate on this some more, throughout your time playing this game, if you ever do, throughout your runtime playing the game, you'll hear a ghost, which is really the voices of other players that are playing as different alternate timeline versions of Alex, doing certain key decisions in the game, allowing players to have vague information access about events that will occur and happen during the future of the story. You can either follow these ghosts' advice or not, depending on what you choose, but it's later explained in the game when you put in the same situation as this other player ghost you're talking to do what they did for you by telling another player that's in another timeline what they should do in the game to affect the outcomes of every scenario, which is a cool mechanic when you're not trying to knock someone's boat over because you're just being a jerk. Overall, this isn't a necessary task to complete, but it's pretty cool, so I bring it up simply because I believe it's unique and it's freaking awesome. However, discussing the story and explaining it all in its entirety so I can talk about it a little at the very end, I will begin and commence that right now. The story is about Alex, and she is on a ferry heading towards Edward's Island for a weekend party. She's with Ren, a rather annoying character at times who is a stoner friend, and Jonas, her new stepbrother. On the island, Alex and friends meet Clicera, the ex-girlfriend of Alex's deceased brother, Michael, who died because he drowned like I said, and Nona, Clarissa's best friend and Ren's love interest, who can do everything besides impress the girl he's crushing on until the very end of the game because of me, the main character, because I'm God. Anyway, Ren explains to everyone that the island was once a military base and that the island's only permanent resident is a lady named Maggie Adler, who has recently died, which gave us incentive to go into the island. But the entire backstory revolving around this character has a tragic becoming, taking place in 1943, where she was positioned at Hayden Tower, where she received butt-kiss orders from a frequency which then caused her to send out ships to scout and bomb an enemy ship if necessary. But this ended up being the USS Kelowna, which was a friendly ship that got bombarded by other friendly ships because she messed up and sank and killed 85 crew members and 12 passengers that happily were on the ship. So she's a mass murderer. This seems completely random, but it'll come up later in the story because it's really important. But after camping on the beach, Alex, Ren, and Jonas explore the nearby caves after some awkward conversations that served as exposition for information that's already said, and I'm not going to repeat it. But in the cave, it's rumored that certain radio frequencies cause supernatural events to happen, and because the story needs this to happen, the characters just do that, initiating The Shining. As a dimensional rift opens up to Spirit Land, where the dead souls that Maggie Adler killed are residing and wanting to escape so they can live their own lives because they believe they died for no good reason, but in actuality they died because of miscommunication, like I explained earlier. Following this, Jonas and Alex awake in front of a communications tower elsewhere on the island, where Ren calls having passed out in the woods, while Clarissa calls from a decommissioned military fort on the island where Maggie Adler used to work, exactly where she gave the order to kill all those men on the submarine. Thus, journeying to either one of the two characters, they travel through the woods, that being Jonas and Alex, as they encounter supernatural events, including Alex's reflection in the water communicating with her, which is the first time-traveling ghost thing that I said and talked about earlier, which causes objects to move on their own, and time loops traveling back in time onto alternate realities. But continuing with the story, when going to find Ren, you find Nona, who claims that she saw an alternate reality version of Jonas and Alex from a different timeline, whereas our timeline, Alex and Jonas finds Ren, but after another time loop, they find him possessed by a ghost, who are the soldiers from the submarine, but by using the radio, Alex creates another rift which returns Ren to normal. Then Ren and Nona return to the tower if you chose to, which I didn't. So proceeding with that storyline, at the military fort, Alex's reflection appears in a mirror, giving Alex advice, which is again a time-traveling ghost of yourself. But then suddenly a ghost possesses Jonah, revealing that the ghosts are the passengers of the submarine USS Kelowna. But that's not entirely true because they are you. To be more specific, the ghosts in the mirrors are you, while the possessed are the sea soldiers who died at sea. But they killed Jonas, so Alex creates another time rift that revives Jonas through time travel / alternate reality hopping, then finding Clarissa, but the time loop starts up again, and she jumps to her death because reasons, before disappearing because reasons. Because that makes sense, or the ghost pirates can only take control over people when they're dead, I'm not entirely sure. But retreating back to the tower, Nona, Alex, and Jonas and Ren regroup and try to process everything that happens. But not being able to send radio transmissions off the island to get help is a huge hindrance to their plan. But because one of them has been to the island more than once, Ren suggests that finding the key to Maggie Adler's house where she has a boat would be more preferable so they can use the boat to get off the island. So when they did that, Clarissa appears again and she's possessed, and talks about scattered letters left behind by Maggie Adler that reveal that she accidentally murdered everyone on the boat. I talked about this earlier, and the crew isn't really dead, but they were transported to another dimension due to the submarine's experimental nuclear reactor, which is something out of the Netflix show Dark or Stranger Things, which kinda doesn't make sense, but let's roll with it. Even though nuclear reactors wouldn't teleport someone to another dimension, you could say like quantum infused dimension, who blah blah, but I don't think a nuclear reactor could really do that. But moving along, they explain that the ghost pirates want to keep Alex and friends on the island for as long as possible until their possession attempts are successful and they're able to take over their bodies and live their own lives. Thus an explanation of why there's so many time loops, so they can continuously trap their bodies. But after continuously exploring the island some more, and conveniently going to Maggie Adler's house like you should have done, but if you were me, I didn't do that immediately, it's conveniently found that a plan was made by Maggie Adler to fix the rift, crossing to the other side, to then tune the radio within it, thus exorcising the ghost from our reality. But for that to happen, Alex repeatedly loops back to the past, mainly 2 times where she talked to her Michael, her dead brother, to find answers. But then, out of all things that could possibly happen, a ghost possesses Jonas again and attempts to bargain with Alex, offering to spare her and the rest of her friends if they leave Clarissa behind. But the ghost also vaguely mentions that this has all happened before and that you will fail. But because you're a spunky teenager with sass, of course we neglect this piece of information. You return to the caves, Alex tunes it into the rift and enters the void, encountering the possessed ghost pirates, who make an ultimatum again with Clarissa, saying that if Alex closes the rift, she'll die, and Clarissa will be kept by the ghost if Alex leaves through the rift as well. But at this point, if you're smart, you'll tune the radio and kill all the ghosts and exorcise them and leave the island. So you also have multiple choices here. You can choose to leave, erasing Clarissa from existence as if she never existed at all, closing the rift, tapping her with the ghost, or if you found enough letters from Maggie Aller, Alex can appeal to the crew members directly, convincing them to let Clarissa go with the cold hard truth of what happened. But this is where we can get into the multiple timelines and the different endings that this game provides, depending on what you choose and what you've done throughout the entirety of the game. Alex can wake up with the others on the ferry, which is the start of the game, where Jonas informs everyone that whatever she did fixed the rifts and that everything is perfectly normal and you shouldn't worry about anything anymore. But that's when everyone on the boat reveals that for a limited period of time they revisited their past memories, or in this specific case, they time traveled. And in an epilogue, Alex reveals the fate of all the characters, with Nona's picture of the group being shown that you took earlier within the story. But the problem is that the screen glitches and everyone's on the boat again, heading to the island because this entire game is a giant time loop that you can never win. So, let me explain some more. In one ending, Clarissa's friendship with Alex and Michael can be either preserved or destroyed, or Clarissa can be sacrificed to the rift, and no one will remember her except Alex. But if she is saved, Ren will either date or not date Nona depending on the Alex's actions. That's not me saying for certain that will occur, that's just me assuming that that will occur. While in another ending, Michael can be revived if Alex encourages him not to move away in the time loop while you go back in the time throughout the segments in the game. And if so, Jonas and Alex will cease to be step-siblings, thus will give the player the power to either destroy or save Michael's relationship with Clarissa. However, the down effect of this is that Jonas gets written out of reality, and assumably he goes back to jail where he said he was in the beginning of the story because he never had met Alex. But here's the plot twist: if you play the game again, you'll have the power to continue the existing timeline, meaning you'll have the power to play the game over again with the knowledge of what happened. And with that knowledge, Alex has the chance to send herself a message from the island, making it so they never stepped foot in it, thus not creating a time loop, thus erasing the entire events of the story from happening, creating a new reality where Alex, Jonas, and Ren are at the supermarket waiting to buy alcohol before getting on the ferry, where she hears a message from her future self sent from the island from the frequency on the recorder that she has, stopping the events of the story once again from ever existing. However, for this to work, an alternative timeline version of Alex has to die so another version of her can be happy with her friends. It's not assumed if Michael's alive or if Jonas exists within this timeline. However, we just have to assume that they do if you want a happy ending. And that's the story of Oxenfree. If this story sounds familiar to you, it's because it's similar to Stephen King's novel and recent Netflix movie, In the Tall Grass. Much like that novel / movie, the story is about consequences, causality, sacrifice, bonds, and of course, isolation, being the defining theme that overarches the entire narrative of the story. Considering there is drama surrounding each character that exists within the story, or manifestations of those isolations, taking the form of an island devoid of nobody but themselves, to the point where they couldn't leave the island till the next morning, and the fact that most of them don't like one another unless they are in love. Clarissa doesn't like Alex and vice versa. Nona and Ren love one another. Ren doesn't like Jonah and vice versa. Clarissa is annoyed by Ren and vice versa. While Nona likes everyone because she's a great and awesome person. But the isolation they all have as characters translate into their individual losses, hence the time travel and the drama and the obsession with the past. Alex needs to start to forgive Michael for the fact that he died and accept a new family in her life and accept that Jonah is the replacement for Michael for her. Clarissa needs to forgive Michael for dying and stop blaming Alex for something that was out of her control. And it continues on and on and on with every character as they try to surpass what they lost, hoping for a better outcome in their future. Overall, Lost is complex in its themes, It's something every person deals with differently and touches us in our weakest spots, and the alternative ending might showcase when someone is unable to move forward and is stuck in the past. Maybe Alex replaced Jonas with Michael because she's unable to move forward because of her guilt, and it's better if he never existed and she saved her brother by warping reality. The game is counterintuitive with its messaging by featuring such an outcome if it was about moving forward past trauma and guilt, but overall, Oxenfree is a decent game in my opinion, and features a somewhat compelling story about choices and perspectives and grief and loss and all that other good stuff. It's rather cut and dry and a bit slapstick with its dry sarcasm, but it's made out of the right peanut butter jam. It's meh.